for like
Yeah, I think they want to be some.
left. Got it. Where? So, so now we are streaming live on YouTube. So,
Yes. We're live. So where's the link? Can I see on your? I want to see on his YouTube. We started.
Is the mic on? Can we start? Can I start? Good morning. Goeiemorgen, Dumelang. Ausheni, Jambo ma Africa. My name is Tsepo Ikaning. I've been asked to be the program director for this first set of the program today. As we all aware, we marking the Africa Communications Week in the Africa month of May. As we join the world, Africa, the continent, in marking this milestone of the formation of the former Organization of African Unity, the precursor of the AU, that is the African Union, that we know that it was rebranded and launched in July 2002 in our shores in our port city of Durban. We are proud to be South Africa that is part of the continental drive to really push forward this agenda of striving to achieve and make sure that we bequeath to future generations the Africa we want, silencing of the guns, economic prosperity. And as we are all aware, this is almost 49 years of this Africa Day, Africa Month commemorations. We also go into our Golden Jubilee. And I think as we push for that, everybody is seized with making sure that what is being achieved is gonna be engraved in historical books for those who are coming after us in terms of what our forefathers, our leaders, and the current leaders are doing to push the African agenda forward and to put Africa in the global map of development, in the global map of security and prosperity. So today is the fourth day. We started on Monday with various speakers talking to the importance of this Africa Week communications, focusing on issues that we can do as communicators. As we are all aware, communications plays a very key part in driving any ideology, in driving any agenda, like we know the agenda we want as Africans, in driving the aspirations and messaging of our leaders, and including those in the business sector, ordinary people, the youth, which are the majority in our continent that we are very much proud of. So we will be engaging now with officials from the Department of Public Service and Administration to talk mainly about one of the key tenets of Africa's own development, which is the Africa Peer Review Mechanism. As you are well aware that this is part of the efforts that was agreed upon by our leaders in 2002 and established formally and became part of the new Africa Partnership Agreement, which is the NIPAT, the much wanted NIPAT in 2003, which was a voluntary mechanism whereby African leaders were given the task of reviewing themselves as peers and not depend on those who are outside of our continent to really view our performance, both politically and economically. So this was one but of the major steps which heralded the new thinking by our leaders, including those in business, to restore that integrity that we all need in terms of governance of our own administrations, jurisdictions. And I think the APRM, the Africa Peer Review Mechanism, was one of the major building blocks of what we have seen being launched in the past 2 years, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, where we're now starting to see countries collaborating in opening up their markets, trading amongst ourselves. And we're also proud that we have our own Ambassador Wamkele Mene based in Accra, Ghana, who's heading the secretariat of this important institution, which is going to be doing a great deal in terms of fostering trade and investment integration within our continent, because we're talking about job creation. How do we use and harness our own resources to create jobs and to be at the forefront of innovation? But you cannot have investment going without having mechanisms as like those of good governance to ensure that governments really are democratic and they also respect issues that relate to trade, to protect those who will be investing both internally and externally. And with that said, I think the APRM is one of those instruments that have been created by our own leaders and driven by our own leaders and officials to carry us forward. And with no further ado, I would like to take this opportunity to call to the stage Mr. Thulani Chefuta, who is the chairperson of the Africa Peer Review Mechanisms at the National Governing Council, to come and give us a speech which will lay the ground, a firm ground in terms of how do we interact. Because without government supports and messaging and also knowing what needs to be done from the higher levels, we cannot proceed forward. So can you come say to the fore and address the audience? Can you give him a round of applause for now?
The program director and all esteemed colleagues, good morning. I wish to start by rising on the already established protocols so that we save time. As indicated, my name is Thulani Chefuta, the chairperson of the National Governing Council of the APRM in South Africa. What we will do in this brief presentation is to take all of us into confidence about what APRM is, about the work that is being done.
Sorry, we need to, otherwise the outside world doesn't see you.
The outside will see us now.
Yes. Presentation to share.
No, we don't have to share. And so again, we convey our greetings to those who are joining us in person and those who are in the virtual world. My name is Thulani Chefuta, serving as the chairperson of the National Governing Council of the APRM in South Africa. We are delighted to have this opportunity for this discussion, which we will use to basically just describe what the APRM is about and the processes that have been undertaken in the country in pursuit of the work of the APRM. And we would be glad to field any discussions after the presentation. And for the completion of this presentation, we will also receive another presentation from our colleagues from the Department of Public Service and Administration in relations to the Africa Public Service Month. So to kick off, we prefer to define the APRM. APRM is the African Peer Review Mechanism. And by definition, it means that it is an instrument through which countries that accede to the APRM basically agree to review each other as peers. And the program director made it easy by highlighting that this is work that has been done previously, but done by institutions from other continents and reviewing African countries. And so this time around, the APRM is an African-owned and African-led process of self-assessment. It is not a popular thing for institutions of governance to take a pause, look back, and assess and reflect on the ground that has been covered. And that is what the APRM does. It is not only about assessing the progress that is being done by the countries that have acceded to the APRM, but it is a platform that is used for sharing of experiences and lessons amongst the countries that are the members of the APRM in the entire continent. What informs that is primarily an acknowledgement that there are things which different countries would have done, there are experiences that they would have acquired, and where there are shortfalls or gaps, other countries in the continent should not fall into the same traps, but they can draw lessons from those who have been there before and improve and do things differently and better than the other countries that would have experienced those problems. And we believe that if the instrument of the APRM is done and done properly, it should lead to good governance and improved service delivery. At a strategic level, because it is an assessment instrument, the APRM can also be used to assess the extent to which countries are performing against their own national development plans, against their targets on Agenda 2063, against their own targets as well on sustainable development goals. Now, the APRM in its design focuses on 5 thematic areas. The first area of focus of the APRM is on democracy and political governance, because we know that without political will and stable governance, all other aspects of life of societies will be badly or negatively affected. The second focus area is on corporate governance. The third focus is on economic governance and management, economic development of the nation, basically. Focus area number 4 is on socio-economic development. And number 5 is on the resilience of the state. We are going to say something about this just shortly. In pursuit of all these pillars of the APRM, there are non-negotiable principles that drive the work of the APRM. The first principle is that for APRM to be successful in its work, it must have national ownership across all sectors of a country where the APRM is undertaken. The second principle that drives the work of the APRM is full participation and inclusive processes. This is critical because in the nature of assessment instruments, others may prefer to listen to the voices that agree with them, voices that are clapping hands for what they are doing, and keep those that are critical on the sidelines. And so for the success of the APRM and for it to be genuine and meaningful, it has to be participatory in nature and inclusive in its processes. And the third principle that drives the work of the APRM is that all its processes must be technically competent. They must be credible and free from any political manipulation. What this means is that right from design, the methodologies and the instruments that are used in this assessment must not be designed to sing praises, even where there are glaring challenges. They must give an objective picture of the state of affairs as it pertains to the current status quo. And so, that is why in its structures, the APRM is not only a government structure, but it includes a participation of structures of civil society. And so that becomes the principles that guide the work of the APRM. In undertaking our processes in South Africa, we are of the firm view that if we are to fulfill these guiding principles of the APRM, it means the efforts that you invest into building a credible, technically competent process that is free from political manipulation, there has to be scientific rigor. That scientific rigor must be juxtaposed and buttressed with processes of public participation, such that people are able to express how their lives have been impacted upon by the pillars of the APRM on the economy, on the political governance, on a corporate governance, and the resilience of the state, and all those other pillars of the work of the APRM. And we are deliberate about this balance between scientific rigor and public participation because others fall into the trap of studying these things on research without a practical application of how the lives of the people are affected. The South African context of internalizing the APRM is premised on the fact that South Africa is no stranger to the culture of self-assessment. The evidence we have to support that is based firstly on the fact that we already undertook the first generation review as far back as 2008, 2009. First generation review of the APRM. Secondly, we have moved to some extent of progress in institutionalizing monitoring and evaluation, even through the establishment of the Department of Performance Monitoring and Evaluation in the presidency, and all the instruments that they have developed to undertake monitoring and evaluation across the different spheres and levels of government. We know that there was a parliamentary process that was undertaken by Parliament of a high-level panel that was chaired by former President Kgalema Motlanthe on the impact of legislation since 1994. We have a process of periodic reviews that is led by the DPME. We had the 10-year review, we had the 15-year review, 20, 25-year reviews. And all those are part of self-assessment in our discourse. And public participation as one of the channels through which we can inform the manner in which service delivery in their communities. When we started our work of the APRM, we moved from the premise that the very last report that South Africa ever submitted to the continental structures was in 2014. So there was a lull from 20 until 20 19. And so we acknowledged that we needed a new level of if we were to make impact through the APRM. When we started with our process, alongside the beginning of the 6th administration, we started with the establishment of national structures. The President of the country and the cabinet led front in terms of appointing the Minister of Public Administration as the national point of the APRM. That was followed by provincial governments also appointing provincial focal points as MECs, the lead persons in championing the work of the APRM alongside the minister as the national focal point. The government side, it did not end there. There was an interministerial committee which included the Minister of Public Service and Administration as the chair of that interministerial committee, including the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, the Minister of Finance, Minister in the Presidency for DPME, the Minister of COGTA. Senior ministers, if you like, as that interministerial committee on APRM to show cause of seriousness of government on that. We went on to establish a multi-sectoral national governing council that has representatives from government itself as these ministers, that has representatives from business, that has representatives from organized labor, that has representatives from various sectors of civil society as the National Council, which we have the privilege and the honor of leading as the chairperson. We also established a national secretariat, which is by Dr. Sokela in the DPSA, in order to give effect to the decisions that we take in the governing structures of the APRM. Now, in the principles of the APRM, we mentioned that we have to lead processes that are technically competent, that are free from political manipulation, which processes must be credible. What we did to fulfill that principle was that we engaged well-established research institutions in institutions of higher learning, that they must help us undertake that work, so that that is work that is done independent of our influence, even as the NGC. And there are various research institutions that are residing with higher education institutions that came to the party to constitute our technical research institutions to undertake that work. We went on to establish our National Governing Council into various work streams along the thematic area of APRM on democracy and good political governance, economic governance and management, corporate governance, socio-economic development, state resilience, and communications. The extent of the progress that we have made after establishing those structures is that what we could not from 2014 to 2019, we have been able to do in 18 months in developing and completing a self-assessment country report, which was approved by Cabinet in December of 2021. After the approval of that report by Cabinet in 2021, we hosted what in the APRM lingo we call a country review mission. A country mission is a delegation of high-level experts, which has technical experts from all regions of the continent, whose expertise on the thematic areas of the APRM, on the economy, on politics, on governance, and all the other pillars of the work of the APRM. We hosted them for the better part of December, took them across the country. They met communities, they met civil society organizations, they met national ministers, they met MECs, premiers, mayors, they met the judiciary, they met trade union, they met business. There is no sector of the society they did not meet. They met Chapter 9 institutions, basically everyone. They had dedicated engagements with media. And so there is just no sector of society that they did not meet. The purpose of that review mission is to assess the self-assessment report that we have developed in identifying our own country challenges, where they come back and say, we think that you have been lenient to yourselves here. There are more glaring challenges that you missed out. And so that is the purpose of that review, of hosting that review mission. That review mission then develops a report that gets to be presented in February, March of every year in the forum of the heads of state and government. This year, that forum took place in March. So for the first time since 2009, the President of the Republic of South Africa, who was also serving as the chairperson of the APRM now, was able to present a country report, a significant achievement. It would have been embarrassing for South Africa to chair the APRM, but in its own country, it does not take its processes seriously. Our president was reviewed in March this year, and out of those, we have been able to get a sense of what have been the challenges that the review mission identified, which we'll be able to share briefly. Now, in the less than 2 years we have been in office, we always challenge South African and other African stakeholders to appreciate the achievements that have been made. Firstly, we did highlight that we have been able to undertake the second generation review in 18 months for something that we could not do in 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, something we could not do in 5 years as a country. Our NGC has been able to do it from beginning to end. Secondly, President Ramaphosa has been able to present his own country report whilst he has been the chairperson of the Forum of Presidents and Heads of States of the APRM. Under the leadership of South Africa in the APRM, in the whole continent, we had the highest number of countries acceding to the APRM than any other term since the APRM, bringing 42 countries now that have acceded to the APRM. There's no other period that had the highest number of accessions. It is not by fluke, it is because President Ramaphosa was dispersing other countries to encourage them to accede to the APRM. It is under the leadership of at the helm of the APRM in the continent that we have had the highest number of reviews taken in a term than any other term since the beginning of the APRM in 2003. All along, the APRM has been assessing on 4 themes: democracy and political governance, economic governance and management, corporate governance, and socio-economic development. There is a new theme that was added last year, which theme is on state resilience. South Africa is the first country to be assessed and reviewed on state resilience. No other country has ever been so far. And so we have been setting a trend in that regard. All other countries that will undertake a review of state resilience will be basically benchmarking from what we have done as South Africa. In the review that we have gone through as South Africa, we must say that we have received a balanced outcome. People who are reviewing us believe that we have a basket of issues that we sell as best practice where other African countries can learn from South Africa. Whilst on the other side, there are areas of glaring weakness where we need to improve as South Africa. Some of the areas that constitute best practice we can share with other countries are in the areas of corporate governance, institutions supporting democracy like the Public Protector, Human Rights Commission, the work that is done by the IEC, the media freedom, and the independent judiciary. Those are just some of the aspects that the review teams felt that South Africa can have something best to share lessons on with other African countries. In terms of the emerging issues across the thematic areas, I will list these just loosely. On the theme of democracy and political governance, it is highlighted that we can no longer escape reform our electoral system in order for power to exchange hands from political parties into the hands of the people and communities. On the theme of corporate governance, it is highlighted that we need more meaningful corporate citizenship and private sector players identifying and supporting the communities where they reside and do business, such that they are not islands of success in oceans of poverty where they do business. On the theme of economic governance and management, we already know our challenges on growth and unemployment, especially youth unemployment. Of greatest concern is that it is not sustainable for the South African society to have few members of society owning the largest percentage of the economy and have the majority owning the least. Even on Economics 101, that is just not sustainable. The transformation of the economy for the majority of the people to have a claim and ownership is no longer. It is no longer sustainable. It is a system that will just serve. The signs of destruction, even into the nub and the essence of our democracy, the fabric of our democracy, will no longer work that you do a big flag that people cannot identify with on the underpinnings of what social cohesion must be about, being equal economic and fair opportunities for all. So it's no longer sustainable. On of socio-economic development, we highlight poverty and basic service delivery issues. On the resilience of the state, we highlight the need for an responsive and sustainable interventions that emerge from the state. What we mean by this is we have to do a bit of thinking about why was it possible for communities who did not have water for 15 years to be able to receive water delivered to their doorstep within 3 months during COVID? What did we have in the 15 years that we had in the 3 months at the beginning of COVID? Why is it that when you have a decision, when you have the resources, when you have the people employed, we are still comfortable to give excuses about why things cannot be done? And that talks to this agile, responsive, and sustainable interventions from the state. And we want to conclude this input by highlighting, in pursuit of our work of the APRM, we were deliberate about integrating the lessons of the first generation review. For example, in the first generation review, it was mentioned that the society has challenges of xenophobia. We carried that theme through into the second generation review. What we're doing about it is that we are implementing plans to host a migration conference where we open ourselves up to say, what is it that the South African state is called upon not to do that is not done by other Africans? What are the lived experiences that lead to these practices that are termed xenophobia? What are the elements of lawlessness that are perpetuated in South Africa that any other country can tolerate? So we open ourselves up to all those lessons. We were intentional about mainstreaming the challenges of youth, women, persons with disability, and other groups. And we want to integrate the lessons from our review process into mainstream national plans and the national program of action, and use these lessons to improve governance and service delivery. You can forget everything else that I said and just listen to this one. The success of the APRM should not be measured how beautiful a report we develop is, but it must be based on the extent to which we are genuine about highlighting the plight of the people, taking those issues, integrating them into the plans such that there is implementation, whose implementation must lead into improved conditions of the people on a daily basis. Good governance is not about institutions and processes, but improving the lives of the people. That is how we want to define success of our work as the APRM. And lastly, the phase we're entering in our work is that which will be taking us to the ground, corner to corner in South Africa, wall to wall, engaging on community-based with people to be able to identify with the work that we're doing as APRM. Thank you very much, colleagues, and I would love to hand over to our colleagues from DPSA and take over and lead the input on the APS. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ntate Chefuda Thulani, for that great inputs. Indeed, I'm so inspired by the zeal that which you presented this morning about the successes and tangible successes that are coming from you as a chairperson of the African Peer Review Mechanism chapter here in South Africa. I must say I'm also humbled that, I mean, it's almost 20 years since APRM was launched. And those times were drawing from the inspiration of Prof. Ambassador Eddie Maloka. Those days, we are theorizing about what we want to achieve. And it took time, basically close to about 10 years before the first 5 countries could sign up from the African Union into this noble initiatives. And for you to say today and stand up here and say about close to 40, about 40 have already done that in the country, in the continent of about 53 nation states, is very impressive. And most of all, I regard you as a young person, a youth endana. So you could see that we really living true to the belief that Africa as a continent in the world that has most of the young people who are the future, we are harnessing the youth dividend that we have here. And I'm so proud as a South African myself to see young people like you being at the forefront of championing what is good. And I think with doing that, you are really charting a way forward for other young people who are coming behind you, because good governance is very important, integral in all of our successes. So I'm glad that you have made this presentation. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, let's give Mr. Thulani Chefuda a round of applause. We really appreciate it. The first segment we dedicated to the Department of Public Service and Administration. And I think you have taken notes from the first speech by Mr. Chefuda, and I will open up the questioning when they have all rounded up from the team that is with. Yeah, I think you're taking notes so that at least when we come to the last part, we are able to pose questions to all 3 of them. And without wasting much time, I'll call Mamello Mohammed to come to the fore and also to speak to us. And I'm happy that she's also well-traveled, and she's one of those who have been there and who've been interacting with the peers in the African continent in sharing best practices. They've started with this APRM. They've seen the flaws, they've seen the challenges, and they've been able to stay the course in the public service. With that knowledge that he has harnessed over the time, she didn't go abroad and work for the World Bank or other international global institutions. She stayed and remained with us here in Africa, in South Africa. And I'm glad that she's with us to share her own insights about what is it that they've garnered in Africa and what she can share in terms of the successes that we can build on as we commemorate close to about 20 years of the establishment of the Africa Peer Review Mechanism. Ma'am Mohammed, the floor is yours. Give her the round of applause, please.
Ke a leboga Ntate Tshepo Ikaneng, and thank you to the chairperson of the NGC. I'm going to request that I too write on the opening that the chairperson made in terms of recognizing the esteemed members that we have in this room today and those who are joining us virtually. Alongside the vigor of the APRM, we have the Africa Public Service Day, which primarily focuses on the public service. Now, what we've done is we've prepared a slide presentation, which I'm going to take a cue from our technical in terms of presenting that slide presentation. But in terms of overview, what we have is Africa Public Service Day being a program that within the country, we regard as one of our service delivery improvement mechanism. And as such, it's coordinated by the DPSA into a national program on how we too reflect on the public service in a continental context and the work that we need to do in speaking to the aspirations of the African Charter and values on public service and administration. Thank you, Ndati. I'm going to skip this. Just a brief background in terms of what Africa Public Service Day is. It is basically a strategic program or intervention that is a brainchild of the Forum of the Pan-African Ministers. And this comes as way back as 1994 as well, where the African ministers came together to talk about how they can come up with programs that the continent can look at in terms of developing a capable development state as far as the public service is concerned. And they do that in terms of celebrating or commemorating the APSD under the auspices of the African Union. Okay. From its inception and up to now, what we've realized is that over time, the APSD, or the Pan-African Ministers Forum, has grown from strength to strength, to the extent of where currently the focus is in creating norms, mapping up common African interests, establishing common rules, and creating common institutions in the areas of governance and public administration. Okay. As a continental strategy, it looks at enhancing public administration and governance across the continent. So there's a lot of intercontinental learning that happens through the APSD platform. And it's used mainly to have the ministers at a continental level as well as at the national level reflect on the functions of the public service, reflecting on the programs and projects, the challenges and successes, giving recognition to the the importance of the civil service, as well as to the benefits of the public servants, the population, civil society, private sector, and government. So the APSD does not, or is not a program that focuses only on the public servants and the public service, but it takes in its view the civil society, private sector, government, business, all elements of society in tandem to what the APRM is also doing. Okay. So when we celebrate the APSD, we touch base with how the public service is being received by all facets of the society. The APSD is commemorated primarily on the 23rd of June. And you'll see that alongside the 23rd of June is what we call the UN Public Service Day as well, which for this year, it's also happening on the 22nd. But what we do on this day, we then look at the theme that the UN would have come up with as an annual theme. And we then contextualize the work of the public service in that theme. I'm going to jump on the slide because the APRM chair did reflect on the role that the DPSA plays, being the focal point. But I think importantly is also the fact that our minister is also part of the STC8 in terms of the Public Service Local Government Urban Development Decentralization Group or team or stream of work. And that in that context, we then deal with the issues of the APSD. Okay. The 2022 theme, and I believe this is not the first time you're hearing it here because this week started on Monday. So within the context of that theme, we're reflecting the work of the public service on the facilitating and realizing Africa's nutritional needs. Okay. But importantly, again, the word that has been used by the APRM in terms of the resilience of the country, particularly when responding to externalities, comes once back again, where we reflect on what are the things that we need to be doing post the COVID to ensure that the issues of nutrition are being attended to and strengthened. What we have planned to do, because the APSD day is only one day, we have proposed a week-long program wherein we have built up activities towards the 23rd. These activities are looking mainly on the context of South Africa in terms of the theme itself, but importantly looking at the priorities in terms of public service that we need to be responding to in addressing the challenges of creating a developmental state. Just to reflect briefly on what we've set ourselves for the objectives of the 2022 APSD, you realize that many of these objectives, we carry them year to year in terms of trying to create continuation on the dialogues that we have and engagements on dealing with the issues that are confronting the public service. So what we're looking to achieve in this year in terms of commemorating that particular program is to reflect on some of the issues that impact on the trust deficit. But as we have seen in our recent disasters, that one of the issues that came out very strongly is the ability of government to earn the trust of the people in addressing the vulnerabilities that they are faced with. Okay, so we will be looking at the issue of rebuilding the trust deficit, or the issues that we have to look at in terms of the public value and trust, and to reflect about on accountability in public administration in the context of that trust. Okay. Looking at ways in which we can strengthen public participation. Now, in terms of the APSD, and having looked at the prior presentation on APRM, you could see how the APSD then responds to what the work of the APRM needs to be through the public service. Okay. So we're also going to look at how to build and strengthen public participation and building partnership for service delivery improvement. We're going to look at sharing experiences on lessons learned in building a resilient public service. I think there's a number of examples that we will be looking at in the country. In particular, I think we reflected on, we've had a disaster called the Day Zero in terms of the water shortages. We'll be looking at the challenges that COVID has also presented. We'll also be looking at the recent disasters that we've been talking about in terms of the KZN, the Northwest, as well as the Eastern Cape, and the resilience that we are building. But over and above that, we'll also be sharing with our member states. I think we're looking at Kenya, Tanzania, and Rwanda, where they will also be sharing their experiences on the resilience they had to build in managing the COVID. As much of the discussion also reflects on the post-COVID rebuilding. We will also be tackling the issues of malnutrition from the country's perspective. One of the things that we did when we internalized the topic was to reflect on what are the key challenges that are facing South Africa in terms of the issues of nutrition. We reflected on one of the reports that are there is that South Africa is one of the is ranked third in terms of obesity. And that's the challenge that we're also going to reflect on to say, how do we deal with the issues of obesity in the country? Okay. But over and above that, there's also the issue of having a high rate on stunt learners or children in the country that are caused due to undernutrition. So we will also be reflecting on the school nutrition program, what is happening there to ensure that we do have a healthy, balanced diet for the children throughout their growth period. But also the last thing we will be doing, because we have a 5-day program, is to also reflect to the youth month, because June month in the country is a youth month, to look at the issues that are confronting the youth in terms of unemployment. But that will be focused in the agricultural context in line with the theme. This I've spoken mainly to. How we will be dealing with the APSD program throughout the week. We are anticipating to have a hybrid model. This program is open to everybody. As we said, APSD is not only on the public service. We open it even to the public through the social media platforms that Moses will be talking to later in terms of our communication strategy to support the APSD. And we're opening it up to all public servants, because this platform, the APSD for us, is a platform where all public servants becomes aware of the issues that are challenging the government, or the issues that government is working on in context to the theme. So every year, based on the thematic area focus, we then have a number of engagements from experts to come and talk to us on the subject itself, so that we become aware of the work of government and what is expected from public servants, to ensure that we align the work we do and we create coherence in terms of the work of government. The program is driven nationally from a national office, but alongside the national program, we are expecting provinces as well as local government level to have their own programs that they have to highlight on issues that are affecting them at a local sphere or at a provincial level in relation to the theme. Okay. So we do this in partnerships, not necessarily only at a national level, but we make sure that the theme and the discussions permeate through all the spheres of government. Just to again reflect briefly on what the key activities are in terms of our activity plan. Because it's a week-long program, we're starting on the 20th of June, which will serve as an inauguration for the week for us, and it's a launch for us, where we will then be reflecting on what will be happening throughout that entire week. And we will be then focusing much of the discussion of that one, the first day, opening day, on the issues of public value and trust, which underpins all other activities of government that we want to highlight during that week. And then one of our, throughout the week, 21, 22, we will have engagement with government departments or government institutions on how we strengthen the resilience of government institutions to deal with the issues of nutrition, but importantly to deal with the issues of disasters, because we are trying to make sure that we are being put in a state where we are able to respond to disasters or externalities as a resilient government, not to be caught off guard. One of our key activity again is the 23rd itself. On the 23rd, we're looking at a national intervention to strengthen food security issues, the social intervention programs that are there at school level, the malnutrition challenges from the obesity, overweight, and developing healthy lifestyle perspective. So there we will also be looking at coming up with ways in terms of how do we begin to build a healthy lifestyle so that we deal with a monster called overweight and obesity, as we've seen in many of the reports, how it then affects or impacts on health issues. Program director, I'm gonna call on Moses to just reflect on what is the communication overview on how we will be carrying the program throughout the week, so that we get a sense of what is the engagement that we could do to popularize and to communicate the APSD program.
Well, Rebuka, thanks very much for Member Mohammed for really giving us a lowdown about what we expect during the Africa Public Service Day. And like we all know that the public service is a bedrock of service delivery. Without them, there's nothing that we can do as ordinary communities and citizens. And we are proud that there is a Pan-African alliance. They are continuing to talk amongst each other as African public servants to see on to how to advance programs like the APRM and other socio-economic development initiative. And I'll call on Mr. Moses Moshi, is also from the Department of Public Service and Administration. As we all know, we are in the Africa Communications Week, and without any communications of what they do at the APRM as public servants, we're not going to be having a lot of information in terms of how our governments across the continent are maybe executing their mandates and also trying to communicate new measures onto how do we going to be communicating post-COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Moshi, the floor is yours, sir.
Thanks, colleagues, and afternoon already. I know that I'm standing between your lunch and so on, but so I will just go through this quickly. We're participating at this forum this year for the second time, and APRM last year made a full presentation, and we were able to see the fruits of that during the review mission, in that the reporting came from an informed position, because we were able to have this discussion before the review to inform our colleagues in the media that how is it going to roll out. And as such, when it was time for reporting, we were satisfied that we got a balanced reporting and a fair coverage as well. The APRM would now be going into what we call the APRM action plan. At that stage, we will issue communications to again engage members of the media, interest them in the program, because as we roll out the program of action, that's where we go out to the communities again. And that's where we need members of the media to be part of those processes so that we can also see how the program is running and then what our community is saying. And so that, you know, when the media scrutinizes us, it makes us to improve. It makes us to keep to our promises and so on. So we value that interaction and we don't take criticism as if it's an attack. We take it as a valuable instrument to help us improve. So with the APRM, one other item I wanted to bring up, Chairperson, is the issue of the stream, the media and communication stream in the APRM. So that is where the media is supposed to be participating. As much as we go out to meet communities during the APRM processes, there is a stream that is created for the media, and that has to do more with media freedom, in not only in the country, but in Africa. So it's a very important element of the APRM that as members of the media, we should engage in. So as we bring the APSD to this platform for the first time, we're taking it that it will be something that we continue to do as well as we move forward to deepen the understanding of the program and the reporting, because that is what this platform is for, to get the media to understand what we are doing so that when we go out to report, we report from an informed position. My colleague Mamelo has presented broadly what we will be doing during the Africa Public Service Day. So what we will be doing from part of the communications is that we will be issuing media advisories, and then we will be breaking down the program according to the dates, the topics, and the people who will be leading those programs so that the media can be able to schedule the events and be available for the events. And we also take, we appreciate the new normal, that journalists in the newsroom, today we are able to cover more than 3-4 stories in a short space of time because of the availability of virtual platforms. So the time that we would be spending traveling to a story, today we can spend that time covering another story. So we do appreciate that, but we also take into consideration that there is an element that even artificial intelligence cannot replace, and that is the human element, that when we are attending events in a physical form, we are able to interact with our principals and get opportunities to ask questions that we necessarily would not be able to ask on virtual platforms, because after our presentations on visual platforms, we are gone. We are hidden behind the virtual platform. And the only way to reach me is to phone me or SMS me, whereas here you could be having that opportunity to ask about the miners in front of the building, Union Building. So we still value that human interaction, that it is still important while we embrace the virtual and the new normal. So we hope this platform will continue to enhance our relationships, and then most important, for a participatory democracy, and making sure that our people know where our government is going, and in making sure that no one is left behind. So we will continue to nurture this relationship as well. Yes, as we come to the end of the program, Mr. Chief. Yeah, thanks very much.
Radeboga, Mr. Mosmushi, for your insights and also explaining to us as to what to expect during your annual commemorations of the Africa Public Service Day. And we hope that you will continue with your pledge to make sure that we are informed in terms of your how you're going to be executing that program, because it's very much important for not us as the media or the NGOs or civil society, but for our own people to understand what we are doing. Because like I said, without the public service, you can't have service delivery and the investment, even investment itself. So guys, we're gonna go to the last section, which I think would take some few minutes about questions. We had main addresses by Mr. Thulani Chifuda, and then we have Mima Homet and Mr. Mosmushi will be able to field questions. It doesn't have to be questions. I think this is an interactive session. It's Africa Communications Week, so you can bring your insights, even if they are not basically about asking particular questions to what has been addressed here. It's a platform where we are sharing knowledge and also some advices or also some challenges that are there that we want us to identify, so that when we meet next year, this time we are able to come with feedback and also being able to improve on our product and offerings. So who's ready to take the first question? You can address it to him. There's Rovi Max here. Be able to assist us? Yes. Anybody? Can I break the ice? Okay. Can I break the ice? Let me ask. My question would be to Mr. Thulani. I want to know, as you have highlighted the successes that you have had, I think your tenure, you say less than 2 years. What has been the role of the private sector? I mean, these are critical component of any government, including the civil society, non-governmental organizations, in terms of engaging them and also getting their inputs as you carry out your duties. And the second one, we're talking about, to say South Africa was the first to be reviewed on the state resilience. That's quite an achievement from where I stand as a person who's in the media industry. I think a lot could have been said in terms of informing the public about how we are and what are the steps in terms of regularly the media in the work that you do, so that we have been kept abreast about the developments and the great work that I think you are doing there at the APRM. You can come to the fourth or.
Thank you. Well, the questions are always easy. The difficult part is the answers. We have representation of the private sector in the National Governing Council of the APRM. And so we want to acknowledge their participation starting from that level. And I'm not sure if it is appropriate to share this because it was shared in a meeting of the National Governing Council. One of the leaders of business, being the private sector, in the NGC, is the current CEO of Business Unity South Africa, Mr. Casco Vadia. After all the work that has been done, he extended in an official meeting an invitation to me as the chair of the NGC to say, after all is said and done, he would like to have a discussion with the chair about the extended role that private sector can play, not only on the theme of the economy and corporate governance, but taking interest on the other themes as well. That is still an outstanding engagement that we should have. We can also indicate that our work stream on corporate governance is chaired by a representative from business. Like we indicated that when we did both the self-assessment country report and hosted the review mission, there were dedicated engagements that both teams had with the private sector in South Africa. Also understanding a perspective from which they are participating in the APRM and view some of the challenges that were confronted. If you want me to be controversial, let me make the point that it remains a sticking issue about the appetite of investments by the private sector. In one of the engagements, it was actually argued that for the global private sector investors to have confidence in the South African economy, the domestic private sector must lead by example in leading those investments. And so those must not only be limited to a role of business that is making demands about a favorable environment. And you see some movement in that regard, but you don't see those translating into tangible investments. So that is one of the sticking issues which was raised about business. So that's how I would want to respond to the issue about the private sector. In terms of the state resilience, basically, we're chartering into new waters. We're not convinced that we did everything that needs to go under that pillar of work. And when we talk about state resilience, we began to introduce things that were not there in the terms of reference of the continental APRM. We began to argue, for example, that when you define a state is not government. So when you talk about the resilience of the state, it is hollow to talk about a resilient government with its processes and structures without talking about the resilience of communities. We must draw lessons about how communities have been undertaking own self-initiative for the sustainability of their own livelihoods and integrate those into bigger lessons. And so the theme of the resilience of the state is an interesting one that is also underpinning a sustainability of interventions. We take engagements with the media very seriously. I made a bold claim here that we were deliberate about integrating the lessons of the first generation review into the second generation review. The issue of media engagement is one of them. In the first generation review, you can go and read it. It says we performed pathetically in terms of engagement with the media and using the media as a platform of communicating with communities. Pathetic, that's how it was tagged. And this time around, to correct that, the first decision we took was that we're not going to use the media only as a channel for us to communicate. We're going to have media as one of the sectors that are represented in the National Governing Council of the APRM. And they are there, actively participating. Secondly, we said we are going to have a dedicated work stream. There is no country in the whole of Africa that has a work stream on communication as part of the thematic focus areas. It is only South Africa. And it is self-imposed to us because of the value we attach to communication. Communication is the only instrument that will help us deliver the principle of the APRM on national ownership. Communication is the only instrument that will help us achieve the second principle of the APRM on participatory and inclusive processes. So it is not something that we do because we have to undertake corporate communications. Let the chairperson of the APRM be in the face of the people. No, it is something that will attach meaningful value to. It is not something that we limit to the structures. In the very first year, if not 6 months of our establishment, we had, Mr. Mushi, a dedicated networking session with media so that we open ourselves up, make them understand the extent of the work we are to do and the direction we are taking as the NGC. And we said that is going to be an annual feature in our program. That is why, basically, for this Africa Communications Week, we could not delegate. I was sharing with colleagues that we attach prime value to this session. I will be traveling 10 hours to come here and back home for the 1 hour engagement that we have. But the value that will come out of that for the work that we do as the NGC cannot be measured by the 10 hours that we'll be spending on air and on the road. And so we open ourselves up to one-on-one engagements, to direct partnership with the media. In fact, there is no activity that we have ever done and not engaged media and have a dedicated briefing with them about the work that we do. After all the major NGC meetings that we have had, we have insisted from the chair of the APRM that we go to GCIS and take the country into confidence so that people can identify with the work that we do. Because its success should be finding expression and translating into what people experience on a daily basis. Thank you very much.
It's my mic on. It's flat. Can you hear me? Do you have somebody? Somebody? Mr. Mulite? The floor is yours. Mr. Mulite, do you want to pose a question?
My question is,
Can you have a sound?
Yeah, from ARPM. I mean, the ARPM, in my understanding, is not an agency that implements. Now, in terms of the reports that you make, how do you ensure that where there are gaps, those gaps are filled, and what powers do you have to ensure that there's implementation? I heard you talk about the immigration conference, but beyond that, what else do you guys do to make sure that South Africa is compliant?
So, it is true that the APRM has been designed as not an implementing agent. But the new vigor we're bringing in is that we're not going to have an APRM that is a talk show. If you take the example you're making about issues of xenophobia having been highlighted and other related intolerances, we could have had an option of saying, we demand that the presidency or the Department of Home Affairs must lead the process of hosting this. And we're saying no, things that are within our powers and reach to do, those we're going to do across all the other aspects of the themes of the APRM. That's the first thing. Because for this duration, we're not going to sit and fold our arms and say we'll wait for government to implement. Of all the findings and the recommendations that we make, the next step is to translate them into a national program of action. What the national program of action means is that we will take those and integrate them into the reviews that we do of the national development plans. And in the South African context, it becomes the NDP, so that they are in the long-term horizon of our planning. And some of them do not necessarily need short-termism. You can't resolve them on the short term. The second thing that we're going to do is to take the same and make sure that they are integrated into the medium-term strategic framework and the annual plans. Now, when we do that, we will be deliberate about following the integration into plans and the budgeting to execute those. Now, it is important to acknowledge that when we talk about the national program of action, it is not a national program of action that will be implemented by government. In that national program of action, there are things that should be done and be done by government. We are going to keep a watch on that because government is in the NGC. There are things that should be done and will be done by civil society. There are things that should be done and will be done by private sector. So when we develop the national program of action, it is the national program of action of the whole of society. And all we will have to do is to hold each other accountable. And then the NGC of the APRM will only be that lead institution through technically competent processes in following through that. Is what government telling us indeed happening? And then we undertake our own processes of assessing if indeed that is happening. And so that is how the implementation of all these issues is going to be. And when we do those, we will punctuate them with periodic reports to every sitting meeting of the APRM at the beginning of every year on an annual basis. Thank you very much.
So can just my last question. I know we are pressed to go for lunch, but I have to ask this question. The cooperation between yourselves and institutions of higher learning and research institutions are very much critical in the work that you do, so that at least there are others who are also reviewing as review yourself. So what you spoke to this, but what are the plans in terms of engaging them and to be part of the work that you do, with a view of increasing the value in the outcomes and the outputs that you could put forward to government in terms of trying to speed up and execute their mandate? Thank you.
So, in conclusion, the extent of commitment from the institutions of higher learning has been amazing. In the first generation review, institutions of higher learning were engaged through a tender. Here is a tender, we want you to research on this, and they did that, and yeah. This time around, when we took leadership of the APRM, we said we must engage and invite these institutions to also be part of the same NGC. We can't view them as service providers only, and they are represented in our NGC. The second thing we did was to challenge the institutions of higher learning by saying, here is what would have been a tender specification, but respond to it, and you will be doing this work pro bono. And institutions responded. In the first period of our work, we did not pay a single cent for institutions of higher learning to produce the country report until the last stages where we needed increased capacity. And then we got an injection of some capital from the Continental Secretariat. And then if we were to meet the deadline of the president reporting in February, then we needed that additional capacity. And those institutions continued to work with us. The beauty about that relationship is that these institutions are not only coming to us when we invite them, they also invite us to their own research platforms. And so out of that relationship, we do not want it to be hit and run. We want it to be a sustainable relationship. It goes beyond institutions of higher learning. Stats SA has raised its hand to say we are sitting with a lot of data of interest to you as the APRM. Human Science Research Council in Pretoria has also raised its hand to say for each of the themes of the APRM, we're going to give you an expert and top it up with a senior executive that will be overseeing all those researchers. And that is a way in which we're opening ourselves up to say, we do not know it all in the first place, but there must be people who do the technical work that are going to quality assure as well as the NGC of the APRM. So that is the relationship that we've been here. Thank you very much.
That was the last answer from you said. A lot of applause to the last question now goes to Nema Mohammed. I think you can come over here with Mr. Moshi. Sorry. Oh, you have a question. I thought, no, okay, it's only me. Okay, you can pose your question, sir.
Yes, I think my.
Just tell us the question first, who's addressed to, so that that person can come to the floor as you're asking the question.
I think it's more peer review and also in general government reporting.
Thank you. Then Mohammed can come.
Now, here's my question. My concern is that we have a very regressive reporting approach, actually, that is government in general. We more generally get to hear about what is lacking versus what is being delivered. And that eventually becomes what is being communicated. And as a public, that's what we consume. Can't the government start investing in a more progressive approach of reporting to say more on what is the government is delivering? Because we have come across a whole lot of government officials who are committed and doing exceptionally well delivering. So that is for me, that is a question that actually I would like to see government being intentional in reporting its successes and its good news.
Can you take up?
And the peer review mechanism then can also be able to take on that as a means to engage whoever is interested in investing, because we have bad news. As an investor, I will be interested in looking at.
Mr. Sheffield, I think it's also to you. How do we streamline communications, two-way communication, getting feedback from the people themselves to make informed decisions?
So for that clarify, not communication, but
Reporting, sorry.
I don't want to be excited about this as a student of monitoring and evaluation, because what we view as reporting is that the next person must be empowered to take the necessary action emanating from that reporting. So the first thing that it must do is to objectively give the state of affairs as in the status quo. Secondly, that reporting, objective as it may be, it must not hide the challenges. Because when you report objectively on the successes like you are saying, you are able to do that you have been doing to sustain success. Do it more so that you achieve more success. And the second part about not hiding challenges is that which helps you to identify where have you been falling short in the actual delivery, because reporting does not manufacture performance or delivery. Reporting only gives a mirror image of what delivery has done or performance has done. And so from that side, it is where you begin to identify the challenges that you may have had, upon which you need to do things differently in order to improve on that performance. That is why we argued in the process of balancing between scientific rigor and meaningful participation, where the reporting is not only based on a scientific study of what researchers do, but I know there are methodologies that take account of the lived experiences of the people, but it must be a permanent feature of how is it that is being reported. The people that it is reported about express the manner in which their lives have been impacted by the aspect of governance, of service delivery, or whatever that it is being reported upon. And so we think that any form of reporting must be underpinned by validation by the people about which the reporting is done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sifuli. I'm still going to call the last cohort, the question to Mr. Mohammed and Mr. Mushi. As from the public service, COVID-19, post-COVID, let me refer to COVID. It has presented challenges in terms of service delivery. For the first time, we're under lockdown, but we had to work. Are you able to share with us in terms of what have you learned, and including lived experiences and the notes that you've been taking from your peers, like you're saying that you've engaged other African countries on how to continue executing your mandates to improve communication, to improve service delivery on the continent. I'll make one example that we knew that people had to apply for jobs, for instance. Now there's new law that you don't have to satisfy many copies. Then, which is a good move and welcomed across the board, because that was one of the major ingredients for people when they have to process those applications, including how you're going to be utilizing the skills amongst the young people who are tech savvy to bring them on board as you transform the public service. So I think that one can be answered by Mr. Mushi, but the first part would be more on the lessons learned and the collaborations that we're making on the continental front from the challenges that will be posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. You can come to the floor, please. This is our last element closed for lunch.
Thank you. One of the activities that will mark the APSD week is the sharing of good practices. So what will be coming out of there as one of the presentation is a report that the Public Service Commission has developed as a result of the survey or the research they conducted on how government responded to the COVID-19 disruptions and the mechanisms or systems that have been put in place to ensure the continuation of service delivery. So that will be shared during the week itself.
Thanks, colleagues. Suppose I must respond to the question on technology, but I thought the question there on how do we invest in communications. I think we can, go into it a little bit. And I think the chair has mentioned some of the initiatives that we have taken on the APRM, the media and networking session that we had last year. We will be convening it again this year. And I think one other thing that we will be looking at, we have the APRM report that is out, and then it's a public document. And now, Chair, if I take it, the report, it is a public document, but from the communication side, we want to take a proactive way of communicating it. Be it in short articles that we address different topics out to the media, and then maybe also making it part of the networking session that we look at the report, because the report is not public relations on the part of government or so. It is looking at the performance of the state. So for us to engage with the media on it and respond to some of the things, that will be some of the proactive ways that we can do it, and then also maybe to have a campaign on communicating the report. And this kind of engagements and press briefings that we can call on some of the work that government is doing. I think the question there could be right, that most of the time government will come to press briefings when we are facing a challenge. So we want to take an approach of even pushing articles, even in a form of advertorials, into the media, explaining some of our policies. Like I know that we have plans for the human resource development strategy that we want to communicate out there so that people can understand upfront the issues of applications for jobs without attaching your qualifications. There's a lot of confusion. We want to also do short videos on that we can just share on social media so people can see an actual person talking to the Z83 form, that this is how you fill it out, and then this is what you do in the CV. Because those questions, they continue to come and people continue to be confused, including sending job applications to me because my email is there on the press statement. So there's a lot of confusion that we can avoid by being proactive. So yes. Chapa, I think I've addressed. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. We know that the chair has to leave, but there are two questions that I have been asked from our screen. See them. The first question is that is there a plan that the government has in place for South African communication graduates? Because we think South African students and graduates may play a vital role in shaping the communication program on the continent. It's from Discat Ngwama from SCAT Media, PRN Media. Is there a plan for government to take through the graduates through their systems so that they can play a role in shaping the government communications machinery? I think Mr. Mushi can tackle that one.
I would normally throw this question to Ayanda, but we do have internship programs that we will be embarking on with the PSETA. So the PSETA will be funding these interns, and then we have identified communication and marketing as one of the areas that must be addressed. And then we call that program the Future of Work ambassadors program. So we will see that campaign rolling out for the launch, for the intake, and then even when we call them ambassadors have been taken in, the campaign will continue where we can have webinars with those who are already in, talking about their experiences, and then also encouraging others to join the programs. So for skills development, we're moving more towards looking at the SETAs, and then for the SETAs to play the role that they are supposed to be playing, not only in communications, but also in the other areas where skills development is required for the country. Yeah, so I think so thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mushi. We really appreciate it. We just concluded the first part of the program, and we just want to say thank you to all the speakers that have come before us, and we really appreciate it. Rajifuga, Mr. Mushi, we're really grateful for your inputs, and I think going forward, we'll have positive responses and reactions in terms of what we do and how do we take your deliberations forward. And I hope that you share your notes with the Secretariat so that they can all be shared with those who have been participating in this first part of the program. We know that the chair has 2 years speech, but we're going to be finishing because we might have to leave the venue earlier than expected. So we want to take the last part, and after that we'll close and we'll go to lunch, and then we're going to be coming back. And with that said, I would like to call Mr. Angelo Tendi from the Charter Council to come to the floor and make a presentation. And after his deliberations, we'll take a question or 2, and then we'll break for lunch, and then we are done for the business of the day. Can we call Mr. Angelo Tendi to the floor? Welcome, sir.
Good evening, my brother. I've got a presentation that good afternoon all. Hope you're all well. Some of you look more nervous than me. I'm not going to be asking questions, so please. I'm in essence here on a report back on what the MAC Charter is, the roadmap of the MAC Charter, when it started initially, okay, where we are right now in the journey of the MAC Charter. And I'm not sure if any of you in the room really know what the MAC Charter is and what our functions are, you know. So based on that, apologies for that. Okay, based on that, I just want to give a brief background on when the MAC Charter started and what the MAC Charter is. The MAC Charter is the Marketing, Advertising and Communications South Africa. That's who we are. In essence, this journey started in 2001 when a meeting by Parliament was held with government and the marketing and advertising and communications sector. Okay. took a 15-year-long journey. And on this journey, there were a lot of intricacies, sensitivities that were addressed, 15 years later, the MAC Charter BE Sector Code was gazetted and implemented, binding all stakeholders within the sector. But there was no council to monitor, enforce, or even measure this gazetted charter. 4 years later, Minister in the Presidency gazetted a call for nominations, in September. With that going out, 215 applications were received, to the response of the Minister's Gazette. A recruitment process was completed and a MAC Charter was formed. The Minister was to launch in 2021 and that didn't happen. But in 2022, the MAC Charter Council was appointed and launched by the Minister in the Presidency. The recruitment process, there were 7 members on a panel that ensured that the process was transparent and the nominees met all the requirements. And organizations representing came from all 7 provinces or from all provinces in South Africa. Altogether, as I said earlier, 250 nominations were received. Of the 215, 30 nominations were non-gender or age-specific. An actual number of nominees that qualified was 131. Of that 131, 23 was youth, 2 was people with disabilities, 68 of those were females, 63 of those were males, and 8 of those nominees were disqualified based on late submissions. The recruitment, as I said earlier, where organizations recruiting came from all provinces. Nominations were received from Gauteng, Western Province, KwaZulu-Natal, Eastern Cape, Limpopo, Free State, Northwest, and in Mpumalanga. There were, however, no nominations from the Northern Cape, and 5 of those nominations were not declared which provinces they came from. The council committee members. The Minister in the Presidency appointed a chairperson, which is myself, while the sector council, which are all the members, nominated a deputy chair, and also the 4 subcommittee chairs as spelled out. Each committee consists of 5 members to 6 members, including that subcommittee chair, who will be reporting the MAC Charter Sector Council on their individual activities, which will be endorsed by the full council, consisting of 25 council members, to serve as a MAC Charter BE Sector Council. Those councils are made up of 4 categories. The first was governance, finance, and fundraising. Then we had research and monitoring, consumer awareness and education, strategy and regulation. And these committees would serve in delivering a code in a year's time from now that's acceptable and transparent and will definitely drive through transformation. Developing the code, had certain criteria or strict criteria. The code must clearly define its scope of application, and it is binding to all MAC sector, all in the MAC sector. Must set targets which are above minimum targets in the generic code of good practice. May also introduce additional elements that are not targets in the generic code of good practice. Must have equitable composition of stakeholders in members of the Sector Charter Council, being it the private sector, organized business, labor, community, and designated groups. The proposed sector code may deviate from targets, points of weightings, and thresholds used in codes only where deviations are justified based on research and sound economic principles. The mandate of the council is to oversee and monitor the implementation of the MEC sector code, ensuring that transformation in the sector is promoted, monitored, and reported to Line Minister, the DTIC, BE Commission, BE Presidential Advisory Council, and Parliament. Provide guidance to sector-specific matters affecting the MEC sector and develop baseline indicators for all different elements of BEE. Sector council are encouraged to be registered as legal entities that exist for non-profit sharing. Sector councils provide a recommendation for setting up sector councils, and sector councils should apply good corporate governance principles in conducting activities. The funding of the council. Okay? The funding activities will start as of middle of June. Okay? The Act further provides that the sector charter council shall be funded, okay, by both private sector and Line Ministry. After our induction in April and May, the MEC Charter Council adopted its own business plan, policies, and is now operating as an independent council. The proposed funding mechanism in the code stipulates that GCIS will provide a secretariat, venues, and a stipend, and a yearly grant. Further funds will be raised from the private sector. The business plan proposes an interim administrative structure of the MEC Charter Council. The resources required to give effect to this vision and mission of the council and the funding mechanism. Okay. Key priorities and council mandate. Our key priority, okay, which takes everybody here, okay, is to review the 2016 Sector Council through public participation, a submission on final sector codes, and the approval and publishing of that code. Okay, it's marked by 4 pillars, being the legislative requirement guiding the sector, okay, through the BEE of 2003, okay, proper legislative objectives, developing the code and the council, okay, the DTIC as the authority of all sectors and codes, okay, transformation charters. Okay, how will this work? Okay, through interactive, language-free, literacy-free, engaging, non-threatening, informative storytelling to drive authenticity, okay, and participation. Intelligent segmentations, personas developed, okay, are essential in the journey to meet the sector's demands for more relevant sector discussions with all MEC stakeholders, okay? How do we do this? By targeting a destination, okay? By researching and surveys, by awareness and consolidations, and by taking these considerations and submitting that there. That's how we as a sector look at driving fruitful discussions and bringing in a new era to what was a very long journey that started in 2001. And in 2021, I believe we have a very dynamic and diverse council that is able to address all these needs, the challenges that we faced, It is a very sensitive yet possible task. And I have my colleague, my deputy chair, sitting in the audience with you. And task to us is a journey that we have called for many years to be completed. And with that that's my report, just reporting back to you on what the MAC Sector Council is. And I know there may be questions. If there are any questions, you may definitely pose those questions. Thank you so much for giving us and affording us the opportunity to present who the MAC Charter is and the function and the purposes or the mandates of the MAC Charter. Thank you. Yes,
A round of applause again for Angelo for giving us this groundbreaking news. We acknowledge that it has taken so long to come with this great initiative in the marketing, advertising, and comms space. In fact, I'm so excited because this is a field of study where we are also in, and we hear a whole lot of great initiatives by the private sector, which is also leading, has been agitating that in this year of communications in digital economies, we need government to play a critical role. It must not only assume its responsibilities to the private sector. We have that the MAC Charter is here with us. So the question for me is that since you are going to be starting your work in earnest around 2 months, you are saying about embarking on a number of awareness campaigns, are you able to tell us as to what kind of form are they going to be taking and what can the communities out there and those interested in this charter and its mandate should be participating going forward?
Thank you. So firstly, we're working on developing a plan, and I like to call it a 100-day plan, okay? And our plan will consist of a strategic plan which will outline our activities, okay? But in that, I'm glad to report that we will be having a website, we will be using social pages. We are also building a hybrid model of where we can communicate with the public, communicate with the private sector, communicate with all stakeholders in this industry. And like I said in the how do we do this, okay? We start having real conversations. And as you said, it's a journey that started way before our time, okay? 2001, I mean, we're talking literally now to almost over 20 years that this journey started. So based on that day, we will be communicating the plan, but already now we are busy with the website. We are busy compiling content and communication for all social media. And we will be operating on a hybrid plan where we can report back and we can be engaged daily, you know, and that's what it is from our side.
Last from me, I mean, whatever we do is we're living in a global village, and I'm glad that this initiative has been undertaken. In terms of comparison studies, as we see, as we look at our peers, those who have been fraught and benefited a lot because of collectiveness and leadership in their respective jurisdictions, like we talk about Rwanda, or about Kenya or Nigeria, how to harness these technologies. What do you think would be the benefit for the nations and its communities here in South Africa?
So from a technology point of view, we know that that's where we are. We're in the digital area, in the age of technology, okay? It is a benefit, but it's also being able to communicate that technology properly. Understanding what IR is. If you speak about IR and people don't understand it or don't have the mechanisms, you know, to receive that, we're defeating the purpose, and hence a multi-focus approach, okay, on work to be carried out. So whether it be, again, I mentioned, whether it be Facebook, whether it be TikTok, whether it be Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, okay, we will be communicating and reaching out to people because I believe it's vital that we, okay, and we are the sector, the communication sector, the marketing sector, the advertising sector. We are of the last to be gazetted, you know, of all other codes. But I can say this to you confidently, with the council that's appointed, believe me, we will leapfrog past many of those other councils. Yes, we have to learn from them, okay? We have to take the good practices, the things that have got them to where they are, okay? But there will also be certain things that we will have to unlearn from them, certain things that may not apply to us, certain things that they have done that have, you know, staggered their growth, staggered communication. I definitely believe we have to be very interactive, you know. Public participation doesn't only mean traveling to provinces, okay? Because that's a long journey. Like I said, we have to build a hybrid model, you know, and we understand what legislation says. We need to be there, we need to be seen in these various provinces. We need to take learnings, we need to do the surveys, we need to do the research, okay? However, with technology, you know, it covers most of that. If you've heard, and that Tulani before this, there's lots of initiatives where we can plug into people like Stats SA and even themselves, you know? And I think that's what we do. That's what we need to do. A country that is beautifully loved and respected on the continent. And, you know, many people call us the big brother of Africa, okay? And as South Africa, I trust me, if we reach out and we start speaking to other nations on our initiatives and their initiatives, how can we fail?
A round of applause. What a way to conclude it, guys. Thank you very much, everyone. Wish you well with your team. We hope to hear from you through the GCIS as you started this important journey. In conclusion, I'd like to call to the floor, I think it's Ayanda Holo, to come and make some conclusionary remarks as their host from the GCIS. One would say we are so proud and we are so happy that we have all made it so possible for us to spend a week here at the Constitutional Hill, a very significant historical place for us as a country. And I think the interactions that have been going on since Monday to today have been fruitful. And we hope to see more of these kind of interactions come to the fore, Reholo, as we close these sessions. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause, Mr. Ayanda, yeah, our host.
Thank you, Tsepo. Thank you, Program Director. Colleagues, friends, once again, thank you for spending your time here. I know time is one thing that you cannot get back again. So we truly, truly appreciate that with everything that you could have done today, you decided to spend this time with us, meaning that you've decided to spare a piece of your life that you can never recover with us. All we wanted to do is to share the little value we have, and that value is really much more on coordinating people and messages and narratives that build narratives that you and I can take in our decision matrix to improve our lives. So we really, really appreciate your time. And I hope with everything that's been discussed from Monday, and especially with the presentations today, that public service is a noble, noble profession. That I myself, I thought I was gonna be here for 2 years, and then 10 years, 11 years later, I'm still here because I'm learning to assist where and contribute where I can, that South Africans can co-govern this beautiful land, that South Africans' democracy lies within us and be based on the actions we do daily. So with those few words and from the bottom of my heart, I really, really like to thank you once more time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ayanda Holo. It's always very encouraging and inspiring to have him around. He's visible, you can see him going up and down, but he's always here. We really appreciate the hospitality and your team, Roland, Moko, and all others who have made our stay here at the Constitutional Hill. Very cool, but it's a change. We are here, we are we are deep in the jail setting, but it has been very warm in terms of the feedback that we've been going and the energy that what has been using over the past few weeks. I can see there's a hand somewhere, somebody wanted to ask something. Mr. Molinde, you wanted to have a closing remark.
No, I was hoping that Mr. Hall would tell us if there's anything.
Okay, yes.
All right, thank you. Tomorrow is gonna be a fun day. Journalists and communicating officers, everyone has been busy the whole week. It's been a jam-packed week. We've had, I think the Chancellor of Germany was here. We had so many things happening this week. So tomorrow is just going to be just fun. Really, we'll meet for sessions. It's more like will be a fun affair with cheese and wine. Yes, so we will be in jail. It will be one of those open days in the women's jail.
Okay, I think that brings to the close the session for today. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for coming, making time to come here. We really appreciate it. Oh, Remus. Oh, it seems like we on the roll.
Yeah, we have Max and engage in technology. So we still interested. And one day we can ask to take of that.
No, you do that, guys. I think you'll caucus about that. But yeah, there is a lot of enthusiasm. There are lots of suggestions out there. But no, now it's time for lunch. I think we must make our way. The Meme would lead us and the guests to go to where they're supposed to be in heavy lunch. So this officially brings to a close to this session. Let's mention they travel safely. Aquaba. Everyone is invited to